Breaking news. 40 states created as Biafra is declared in Finland. To my dear listeners, good evening from wherever you're listening from. Before I go into details, kindly ensure you like, subscribe, and share. Now the details. Supporters of Simon Ekpa have declared the formation of the United States of Biafra in Finland. The announcement came during a conference held in Lahti on November 29, 2024, where Ekpa's followers gathered to proclaim an independent Biafran state. Ekpa, the self-proclaimed Prime Minister of the Biafra Republic government in exile, is presently in custody, facing terrorism-related charges for allegedly inciting violence in Nigeria's southeast region through social media. Though the declaration had initially been scheduled for December 2, the event came earlier following Ekpa's arrest. Ngozi Orabueze, who was appointed by Ekpa as the Chief of Staff of the United States of Biafra, led the ceremony. Orabueze, an advocate of Biafran sovereignty, announced the establishment of the new state, which she said would operate with its own currency and time zone. Orabueze wrote, "It is done. Biafrans in Finland for the declaration of the independent United States of Biafra. Power belongs to the people." She later added, "Biafra has been redeclared today, 29th of November 2024, by Ngozi Orabueze, the Chief of Staff, United States of Biafra. Congratulations to all Biafrans all over the world." Afterwards, Orabueze, taking the oath of office, listed the state within the newly redeclared United States of Biafra. States 1. Aba, capital Aba, former state Abia. State 2. Adoka, capital Konshisha, former state Lower Benue. State 3. Afemei Igodomigodo, capital Auchi, former state Edo. State 4. Ahoada, capital Ahoada, former state Rivers. State 5. Akwa Oro, capital Oron, former state Akwa Ibom. State 6. Alanso, capital Nsukka, former state Enugu. State 7. Alahudo, capital Obasi Nnunu, former state Abia. State 8. Anioma, capital Asaba, former state Delta. State 9. Branem, capital Wabise, former state Bayelsa. State 10. Calabar, capital Calabar, former state Cross River. State 11. Ebonyi, capital Abakaliki, former state Ebonyi. State 12. Ebube, capital Ebube, former state Ebonyi. State 13. Eda, capital Ekoli, former state Ebonyi. State 14. Enugu, capital Enugu, former state Enugu. State 15. Epie, capital Yenogua, former state Bayelsa. State 16. Eson Igodomigodo, capital Ekpoma, former state Edo. State 17. Eziani, capital Ugocha, former state Edo. State 18. Idem Ugodomigodo, capital Eho, former state Edo. State 19. Idong Ibon, capital Uyo, former state Akwa Ibom. State 20. Igala, capital Ekpa, former state Kogi. State 21, Igbani, capital Bonny, former state Bayelsa. State 22, Ika, capital Igbodo, former state Delta. State 23, Ikemba, capital Awka, former state Anambra. State 24, Ikom, capital Obubra, Boje, former state Cross River. State 25, Ikulmesia, capital Umaya, former state Abia. State 26, Itai, capital Ikot Ekpene, former state Akwa Ibom. State 27, Iwere, capital Koko, former state Delta. State 28, Uworoja, capital Igocha, former state Rivers. State 29, Odumegu, capital Uga, former state Anambra. State 30, Ogbia Izon, capital Ogbia, former state Bayelsa. State 31, Ogocha, capital Obudu, former state Cross River. State 32, State Ohabueng, capital Mbanato, former state Enugu. State 33, Ohaoko, capital Ezangbo, former state Ebonyi. State 34, Okigwe, capital Okigwe, former state Imo. State 35, Omambala, capital Onitsha, former state Anambra. State 36, Olu, capital Akata, former state Imo. State 37, Owerri, capital Owerri, former state Imo. State 38, Kwa, capital Eket, former state Akwa Ibom. State 39, South Atlantic, capital Sagbama, former state Bayelsa. State 40, Urobo Isoko, capital Ugeli, former state Delta. Meanwhile, Simon Ekpa will spend Christmas and New Year breaks in detention as the Finnish legal system does not permit bail. Report that the pro-Biafran agitator will face charges in May 2025. To my dear listeners, now we've come to the end of our today's news. Please do drop by the comment section and let us know what your view is all about. Thank you for listening.